At 7:22 in the morning on a quiet downtown Oakland street, a man in a ski mask stepped out of a white van. He was carrying a shotgun. He had been following his target since the night before. The target was a journalist. In a few minutes' time, he will shoot the journalist 3 times. But what did this journalist do to deserve this? And what will be the aftermath for this crime? To understand, we need to go a few weeks back.
Kodix.
Oakland, California, summer 2007. Chauncey Bailey was not a flashy reporter. He was a veteran, a community journalist who had dedicated his career to covering the stories that mattered to Black Oakland bikes, the kind of stories that made powerful people uncomfortable. As editor-in-chief of the Oakland Post, he was known, respected, and trusted. He was also, in the final weeks of his life, working on what would become the most dangerous story he had ever touched. The subject was Your Black Muslim Bakery, a business that had been woven into the fabric of North Oakland for decades. Founded by the charismatic and controversial Yusuf Bey, YBMB presented itself as a pillar of Black empowerment, a legitimate business, a spiritual community, a source of pride. But beneath that surface, the organization was rotting from within. By October 2006, the bakery had filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy. It carried $900,000 in debt, most of it owed to a mortgage holder who was now threatening foreclosure. An additional $200,000 was owed to the IRS. The man now at the helm of this sinking ship was Yusuf Bey IV, the founder's son, just 21 years old, hungry for power, and almost completely indifferent to the law. Bailey had a source inside the organization, a former employee named Ali Salim Bey, no relation to the owner, who had watched the bakery be seized through fraud and forgery by a younger branch of the Bey family. He had watched the legitimate heir to the organization, Wajid Al-Jawad, disappear in early 2004. Al-Jawad's body was found months later in the Oakland Hills, bound with electrical tape, wrapped in a tarpaulin. No one was ever charged. Bailey was building the story carefully. His editor at the Post, Paul Cobb, had already held back an earlier draft, deciding it wasn't ready. The Oakland police, aware of what Bailey was digging into, had quietly asked Cobb not to publish anything yet. But Bailey kept going. He kept asking questions. He kept getting closer. And somewhere across town, in the bakery compound on San Pablo Avenue, Yusuf Bey IV was watching. After seeing what Chauncey Bailey was digging into, how long does it take him to react, and will Bailey ever see what's coming before it's too late? Yusuf Bey IV was not a man who responded to threats with patience. His criminal record by mid-2007 read like a sprawling rap sheet of recklessness. Stolen cars, fraudulent mortgages, weapons charges, assault, kidnapping. He had stormed liquor stores with men in suits, smashing bottles and stealing a Mossberg shotgun in the process. The same shotgun that would later be used to kill Chauncey Bailey. He had ordered the murder of an innocent man, Odell Robertson, simply because Robertson was related to the person who had killed Bay's brother. He had watched another man, Michael Wills, a chef, a stranger white, get shot 6 times in the street after a casual conversation in a car about the Zebra murders. Violence for Bay 4 was simply a management tool. When he learned that Bailey was preparing to publish an exposé that could accelerate the bakery's collapse and potentially expose criminal activity within the organization, he made a decision. He called in Devaughndre Broussard, a 19-year-old handyman and sometime cook who had recently been rehired at the bakery after a brief absence. The order was straightforward. Find out where Bailey lives. Learn his routine. Take him out before he writes that article. Broussard began his surveillance the night before the murder. On the evening of August 1st, 2007, he went to Bailey's apartment near Lake Merritt. Bailey wasn't home. Early on the morning of August 2nd, Broussard checked Bailey's office at the Post. Too early, Bailey hadn't arrived yet. He circled back to the apartment. Nothing. But Broussard knew Bailey's routine. He knew where Bailey ate breakfast every morning. He knew about the McDonald's on the corner of 14th and Jackson. At 7:17 a.m., an AC transit bus driver spotted a man near Bailey's apartment complex on International Boulevard, standing in the open with a shotgun. The driver called it in. Alameda County deputies responded. By the time they arrived, the man was gone. 20 minutes later, Broussard, wearing a ski mask and dark clothing set, stepped out of a white Ford Aerostar van driven by Antoine McKay and walked toward Chauncey Bailey on the 200 block of 14th Street. One witness heard Bailey say 3 words, "Please don't kill me." Broussard fired the first shot into Bailey's chest. Bailey fell. Broussard stood over him and fired again, this time at his face. Then a third shot, a final one, to make certain. He ran back to the van. Mackey drove away. Chauncey Bailey was pronounced dead at the scene. He was 57 years old. The next morning, as Oakland was still in shock, Judge Edward Jellin ordered the bakery's bankruptcy converted to Chapter 7 liquidation. The organization Bailey had spent his final weeks investigating was ordered to be dissolved, just 24 hours too late to save the man who had been trying to expose it. Now, your black Muslim bakery is not under investigation anymore because the threat has been eliminated. That's what it seems. However, little did they realize that the worst was yet to come. The response from law enforcement was overwhelming. At 5 a.m. on August 3rd, less than 24 hours after the murder, more than 200 Oakland police officers and SWAT team members fanned out across North Oakland. They sealed off blocks around the bakery's 2 locations on San Pablo Avenue, used stun grenades, broke down doors, and detained 19 people. Inside a closet of a home whose backyard connected directly to the bakery compound, they found the Mossberg shotgun used to kill Bailey. Broussard was arrested. He told detectives he considered himself a good soldier. He was booked on suspicion of murder on August 4th, but the investigation quickly hit turbulence. Broussard confessed, then recanted. In a 2008 appearance on 60 Minutes, he claimed Yusuf Bey IV had pressured him inside a police holding facility, that Oakland police had placed the 2 men together in a room, and that Bey IV had convinced him to take the fall alone, to protect others. Whether or not that account was entirely true, it illustrated the suffocating reach of Bey IV's influence, even from behind bars. Then, in June 2008, journalists from what had become known as the Chauncey Bailey Project, a coalition of reporters determined to finish what Bailey had started, obtained a jailhouse videotape. On it, Bey IV could be seen whispering to his half-brother and a bakery associate. The transcription of that conversation appeared to reveal his direct involvement in Bailey's murder. A grand jury indicted Bey IV in April 2009. The charges: ordering the murders of Chauncey Bailey, Odell Robertson, and Michael Wills. The wheels of justice had begun to turn, slowly and against fierce resistance. Bey IV's tentacles reached into the courtroom itself. Witnesses changed their stories. One man who had originally given information to police claimed he could not remember basic facts, over 50 times on the stand. Recorded phone calls between Bay 4 and a former bakery follower revealed him first cajoling, then warning the man not to testify. His own attorney, Lorna Brown, was later convicted in 2013 of smuggling documents out of jail on his behalf, including a hit list ordering an associate to kill a witness. The document was intercepted before the murder could be carried out. Even Broussard, now cooperating with prosecutors in exchange for a reduced sentence, admitted on the stand that he could not remember Bay 4 giving him specific orders. The memory, he said, had faded. Now that Broussard is cooperating with prosecutors, will Yusuf Bey IV and Antoine Mackay receive the sentence they deserve? What will happen to Broussard if Yusuf Bey IV finds out Broussard is now an informant? On June 9th, 2011, nearly 4 years after Chauncey Bailey was killed on a downtown Oakland sidewalk, a jury convicted Yusuf Bey IV on 3 counts of first-degree murder. Antoine Mackay was convicted of 2 counts. Both were sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Devaughndre Broussard, the man who pulled the trigger 3 times, had already made his deal. In exchange for his testimony against Bey IV and Mackay, he pleaded guilty to involuntary manslaughter and accepted a 25-year sentence. He would not be charged with first-degree murder. He would not face life without parole. He would one day walk free. That day came on June 5th, 2025. California's Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation confirmed his release into parole supervision with almost no fanfare. No press conference, no public statement. Just a quiet administrative entry and a door swinging open. Devaughndre Broussard, who stalked a journalist through the streets of Oakland for 2 days, who stood over a dying man and fired a shotgun into his face to make sure the job was done, who then described himself to detectives as a good soldier, was free. He was 37 years old. His release reignited a question that had never fully gone away. Was the deal worth it? Prosecutors would argue yes. Without Broussard's testimony, Yusuf Bey IV, the man who gave the order, the man whose paranoia and violence had already claimed multiple lives, might never have been convicted. The deal was transactional, cold, and necessary. That is how the criminal justice system often works. But Bailey's family, his colleagues, and the journalists who spent years finishing his story see another number alongside the legal calculus. Chauncey Bailey was 57 years old. He had a teenage son. He said, "Please don't kill me," and was shot 3 times anyway. The man who pulled the trigger served roughly 18 years. Yusuf Bey IV remains in prison for the rest of his life. Antoine Mackay remains in prison for the rest of his life. The bakery is gone, liquidated by court order the week after the murder it ordered. The organization that styled itself as a beacon of black empowerment collapsed entirely under the weight of its own fraud and violence. And yet, Devaughndre Broussard is free, walking the same California streets where Chauncey Bailey never got to grow old. Bailey was the first American journalist killed for domestic reporting since 1976. In the years since his death, press freedom advocates have pointed to his case as a warning, not just about physical danger, but about the specific vulnerability of local journalists covering powerful community institutions. The stories that don't make national headlines until a reporter ends up dead in the street. 700 people filled St. Benedict's Church in East Oakland on the morning of August 8th, 2007. The line stretched outside for more than an hour. Mayor Ron Dellums was there. Congresswoman Barbara Lee was there. His father was there. His son was there. The story Chauncey Bailey was killed for trying to tell was eventually told by the coalition of journalists who formed the Chauncey Bailey Project in his name, who refused to let his murder become just another unsolved Oakland crime. They finished his work. They helped put his killers away. But no story, however well reported, brings a man back.